Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human researched and written material. So I want you to imagine your absolute worst enemy, like the person who has spent their entire adult life actively trying to ruin your reputation.
Right, just actively undermining your work.
Exactly. Trying to destroy the community you've built. Now imagine that person dies, and their family comes to you with a request. They want you to donate your own shirt to use as their burial shroud.
Which is a huge ask.
Right. And they want you to personally lead their funeral service.
Right.
What do you do? Because, human instinct, and certainly our modern culture, would tell you to just laugh them out of the room.
Absolutely. It goes against, everything we're taught about boundaries today.
Yeah. So today we are diving deep into an ancient text to explore a moment where a leader did the exact opposite. We're looking at a scholarly commentary on chapters 9 through 15 of the Qur'an. So that includes chapters named Jonah, Hud, Joseph, the thunder, Abraham, and the rock.
And our mission here isn't just, a historical survey.
No, definitely not. We want to welcome you, the learner, to today's deep dive. We are going to unpack the absolute limits of grace, the anatomy of sincerity, the psychological reality of envy, and the ancient cure for what we now call the attention economy.
It is just a remarkable set of texts, and we have to establish the premise right from the start here. We aren't looking at this merely as ancient history. The text and the extensive commentary surrounding it acts as a profound psychological and moral mirror for the 21st century listener.
A mirror for you, the learner.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
We are looking at human behavior, societal dynamics, how we handle adversity, and honestly, how we navigate the relentless, deafening noise of the world around us. Because while our technology has evolved drastically, human nature just hasn't changed at all.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if human nature hasn't changed, then the internal struggles of the people detailed in these texts, there are struggles right now today. So to start unpacking this, we have to look at the internal state of a community when it's placed under immense pressure.
Yeah, because crisis always reveals who is actually on the team.
Right, and who is just wearing the jersey, you know? And the commentary places a heavy focus on the events surrounding Chapter 9. So set the scene for us. What exactly was happening in Medina that makes this such a profound case study in human behavior?
Well, to really grasp the psychological weight of this chapter, we need to understand the geopolitical and the environmental reality of the Tabuk expedition.
Okay.
So the early Muslim community in Medina was facing a severe trial. They received intelligence of an impending massive threat from the Byzantine Empire.
Which was a massive superpower at the time.
Exactly, a superpower. So to counter this, they had to mobilize a defense and march to Tabuk. But the timing couldn't have been worse. It was the absolute peak of the summer heat in the Arabian Peninsula.
Ugh, wow. So brutal heat.
Brutal. And it was a time of drought. But cruelly, the harvest was just becoming ripe, meaning staying home offered comfort and economic security, while leaving meant potential starvation, dehydration, and a highly dangerous military encounter.
So it's basically the ultimate stress test.
Yeah.
It requires absolute, sincere commitment. You can't fake your way through a march into the desert against a superpower.
Exactly. You just can't. And the text details how this immense pressure fractured the community into distinct psychological profiles. When resources were desperately needed to fund this defense, the sincere members of the community acted immediately. The wealthier individuals gave massive foundational donations.
Right.
But what's equally highlighted is the poorer members, people who had practically nothing, who brought what the commentary calls their might, like handfuls of dates, tiny amounts of provisions.
So they literally brought whatever they could carry.
Yes, they brought everything they had.
They had skin in the game.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the volume of the contribution, right? It was about the totality of the commitment.
Right, exactly. But within the same community, there was a faction explicitly referred to in the text as the hypocrites. And their behavior is just a masterclass in toxic social dynamics.
How so?
Well, they didn't just refuse to help, they actively weaponized their cynicism. So when the wealthy gave their large donations, the hypocrites mocked them, accusing them of just making a show of their wealth, performative charity.
Oh, wow.
And then when the poor brought their meager handfuls of dates, the hypocrites mocked them too, laughing at how insignificant and useless their contributions were against a Byzantine army.
That is such a recognizable archetype. It's the double bind of the cynic. Like, the cynic never actually builds anything, but they are hypercritical of anyone who tries.
Always.
If you do something big, you're arrogant. If you do something small, well, you're pathetic. It's really just a defense mechanism to justify their own inaction.
It is entirely a defense mechanism. And it extended to their own participation, too. When it came time to actually march, to do the heavy lifting, various subgroups within this faction, including some referred to as desert Arabs, they came up with endless, highly curated excuses to stay behind.
Like what?
They claimed they physically couldn't endure the heat. Or they claimed their homes would be vulnerable if they left. They claimed they lacked the specific provisions required. Just excuse after excuse.
Right. So they wanted the social and economic benefits of belonging to the community. The second the cost of admission required actual discomfort, they vanished.
Exactly.
If we translate this to the modern world for the listener, this is the absolute ancient equivalent of performative virtue or virtue signaling. It challenges how you and I operate in our workplaces, our political movements, or our local communities.
Oh, it really does.
It asks a deeply uncomfortable question. Are you genuinely contributing when the project is failing, when the social climate is hostile, when the work is unglamorous and hard? Or are you just dropping a supportive emoji in the Slack channel, making excuses about your bandwidth, and seeking the social benefits of the group without doing any of the work?
Yeah, and the text goes even deeper into the anatomy of this insincerity. It notes that these individuals would swear solemn, heavy oaths to the believers' faces just to please them.
So they'd say whatever sounded good in the moment.
Right. They would say whatever the community wanted to hear to maintain their status. But in private, they actively mocked the faithful. The commentary summarizes their entire existence as enjoining evil and forbidding good.
Wow.
Meaning they actively encouraged toxic behavior and suppressed constructive action, all while withholding their hands. That physical imagery of keeping your hands in your pockets when there's actual work to be done, that is the defining trait of the hypocrite.
Okay, so this brings us back to that wild scenario I mentioned at the very beginning of the deep dive. We have this faction of people who are not just passive freeloaders, but active saboteurs. They are mocking the vulnerable, undermining the mission, dodging the work. Logically, as a leader, you identify these toxic elements and you excise them.
You'd think so, yeah.
You cut them out for the health of the organism.
Mm-hmm.
But the commentary introduces this fascinating historical detail about a man named Abdullah bin Ubay. Walk us through who this guy actually was.
So Abdullah bin Ubay wasn't just a casual hypocrite who occasionally shirked his duties. He was the recognized, undisputed chief of the hypocrites in Medina.
The chief, okay.
According to the historical sources cited in the commentary, he led a sophisticated secret movement against the Prophet his entire life. Before the Prophet arrived in Medina, Ubay was positioned to become the king of the city.
Oh, so he had a lot to lose.
Everything. The arrival of this new spiritual and social order completely displaced his power. So he harbored a deep, simmering resentment. He maintained a network of informants. He was aware of all the movements of the community and actively, intentionally deceived them and abandoned them at their most critical, dangerous moments on the battlefield.
Yeah, so to put it in modern terms, he is committing active treason against a fledgling, highly vulnerable community. He is the ultimate bad actor. He's the guy leaking corporate secrets to your competitor while smiling at you in the board meeting.
That is a very accurate parallel. But then Abdullah bin Ubay dies. And his son, who importantly was a sincere and devoted member of the community, comes to the Prophet. Yeah. And the son makes two requests that seem incredibly audacious given the history.
Right.
He asked for the Prophet's own shirt to serve as his father's burial shroud. And he asked the Prophet to personally conduct the funeral prayer.
And the logical, self-respecting response would be a definitive no. In our modern era, I mean, we live in a culture of immediate and absolute boundary setting. If someone is toxic, if they slight us, if they undermine us, the immediate cultural advice is to cut them off entirely.
Yeah, protect your peace.
Right. Burn the bridge, protect your peace, cancel them. So what does the Prophet actually do?
He grants the request. He physically takes off his shirt and gives it to the son to wrap the body of his lifelong enemy, and then he steps forward to lead the burial ceremony.
That is it almost sounds foolish.
Well, it sounded foolish to some of the people standing there, too. The historical accounts note that one of his closest companions, Gumar, was so shocked that he actually took hold of the Prophet's garment and physically tried to hold him back.
Oh, wow. He physically grabbed him.
Yeah. Umar objected, basically saying, "Why are you praying over this man? He is a hypocrite. He is an enemy. He spent his life trying to destroy us."
So how does the Prophet justify it?
His response reveals a fascinating interpretation of the divine text. There was a previous revelation regarding the hypocrites that stated, ask forgiveness for them or do not ask forgiveness for them. Even if you ask for forgiveness for them 70 times, Allah will not forgive them.
So Umar is saying, the text says God won't forgive them, so why do this?
Exactly. But the Prophet interpreted that verse not as a strict ban, but as a threshold of unimaginable grace. He told Umar that if he knew asking more than 70 times would somehow secure forgiveness for this man who had tried to destroy him, he would gladly do it.
Wait, let's just pause on that. The psychology of that response is profound. He is looking at the number 70 not as a limit on his own compassion, but as a challenge. He's saying, my baseline instinct toward my worst enemy is a radical, unrelenting grace. I want to forgive him so badly that I would blow past the stated limit if I thought it would work. That completely inverts our modern concept of justice and vengeance.
It really does. It shows a leader who is operating from a place of supreme internal security. He didn't need to punish Ubay posthumously to validate his own power. But, and this is where the commentary provides vital discernment, this radical individual grace is eventually balanced by a structural boundary.
Because you can't just let toxic people run rampant over a community forever, right? I mean, there has to be a line.
Precisely. The commentary points out that this specific incident is what prompted a direct divine revelation that finally stopped the prophet from offering these prayers for the hypocrites. The text comes down and establishes a definitive boundary. It says, and never offer prayer for any one of them who dies, surely they disbelieve. It formally severed the spiritual and social connection.
So how do we synthesize that? We have this incredible display of grace, immediately followed by a divine mandate to stop offering that grace.
Well, if we look at the larger philosophical framework, it presents a highly sophisticated model of leadership, empathy, and boundary setting. As an individual, your baseline, your heart posture should be astonishing grace. It should be an almost irrational willingness to forgive, to offer your own shirt to your enemy.
Yeah.
But as a steward of a community, a family, or an organization, there comes a definitive, objective point where you cannot indefinitely protect or validate those who persistently sabotage the shared mission. The grace is the ideal for the individual soul, but the boundary is the practical necessity for the survival of the community. You really have to have both.
So what does this all mean for you? Think about your own life right now. You're likely navigating relationships, at work, in your extended family, or in your social circles where you are trying to find this exact balance. The ancient wisdom here suggests an audit. First, audit your commitments. Where are you the hypocrite? Where are you making elaborate excuses to stay behind while demanding the benefits of the team?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is. And second, audit your boundaries. Where are you perhaps failing to extend grace to someone who is just struggling? Versus where are you failing to set a hard structural boundary against someone who is actively toxic to your environment? Sincerity requires holding both radical empathy and absolute truth at the same time.
And that tension, the difficulty of doing the sincere, heavy lifting over a long period of time is exactly why people often default to performative behavior. It's much easier to fake it. Which leads us into the deep psychological exploration found in chapters 10 and 13, Jonah and the Thunder.
Okay, moving into section 2.
Right, because if we want to know why people operate with performative insincerity, we have to look at how human beings perceive time and results.
Oh, this is where it gets incredibly relevant. Because if there is one thing modern humans have completely lost, it's a healthy relationship with time. We are conditioned by algorithmic dopamine loops. We expect our packages in 2 hours, our entertainment in 15-second increments, and our career success by age 25.
Yeah, everything is instant.
If we don't see immediate results, we assume we failed.
And that obsession with immediate visible results, it's not a modern technological invention. It is a fundamental flaw in human hardware. The opponents of the prophet in Mecca, the Quraysh, suffered from the exact same impatience.
Really? How so?
The commentary highlights a recurring, almost taunting theme from the unbelievers. They repeatedly demanded immediate punishment as proof of the prophet's message. They would say, you keep warning us about a divine judgment if we don't change our ways. Well, if you are telling the truth, bring the doom right now. Strike us down today.
Wow.
They wanted an immediate, spectacular sign to validate his claims.
It's the ancient version of PIX, or it didn't happen. If there isn't an immediate, observable, dramatic consequence, they assume the underlying truth is false.
Exactly. But the Quranic text responds with a profound statement on the nature of divine patience versus human haste. It states that if God were to hasten evil or punishment to men the way men constantly desire good things to be hastened, their doom would have been decreed long ago.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. If the universe operated on the rapid-fire timeline of human emotion, humanity would have destroyed itself. Instead, the text insists that mercy precedes punishment. Judgment is deferred. The divine dealing with humanity is characterized by an immense, spacious patience that allows time for reflection, for behavior modification, and for truth to slowly take root.
And to explain how truth actually takes root over time, the text offers one of the most vivid analogies I've ever heard. Walk us through the metaphor in chapter 13, the chapter named The Thunder.
This is truly a masterpiece of visual theology. The text compares the revelation of truth to water sent down from the clouds. When the rain falls, it flows through the valleys according to their specific capacity. But as this life-giving water rushes down the valley, a swelling foam is carried along on the surface.
Right.
It's frothy, it's loud, and it rides on top of the water. The verse then extends this natural metaphor into a metallurgical one. It mentions the fires people kindle when smelting metals to make ornaments or tools. When you heat the metal, a scum or dross rises to the surface.
So you have these two images, right? The foam on the flood water and the scum on the molten metal. What is the text doing with this?
It draws a definitive conclusion about permanence. The text says that both the foam and the scum eventually pass away as totally worthless. They are highly visible for a moment, but they vanish. But the water, the pure element that profits the people and sustains life, that remains deep in the earth as groundwater.
That is just a flawless translation of our current reality. If you want to understand the modern internet, the attention economy, or modern corporate culture, you just have to look at the swelling foam.
Absolutely.
Foam is viral outrage. It's the loud, aggressive arguments on social media. It's the overnight crypto millionaire who turns out to be running a Ponzi scheme. It's the superficial trends that dominate the news cycle for 48 hours and are then completely forgotten. The foam is highly visible. It sits right on the surface. It demands your attention. If you look at a rushing river, all you see is the foam.
Yeah, it completely obscures the actual substance.
Exactly. But the water, the groundwater, is deep work. It is quiet. It's the genuine, messy relationships you build over decades. It's the slow, unglamorous process of mastering a skill or raising a child. It's the foundational stuff that actually sustains human life, but it rarely goes viral. And it doesn't happen overnight.
The foam operates on a scale of minutes and days. The groundwater operates on a scale of decades and centuries. But here is where the text challenges us, It's very easy to cognitively agree that groundwater is better than foam. But when you are actually living in a society that financially and socially rewards the foam, how do you keep your nerve?
That is the million-dollar question. Because the algorithms literally reward the foam. So how does a modern learner, someone trying to build a meaningful career, a stable family, or a deep intellectual life, how do they avoid panicking when everyone around them seems to be surfing the foam and getting rich or famous doing it?
To answer that, we have to look at how the commentary addresses our perception of time and consequences, specifically through a fascinating linguistic debate surrounding the Arabic word abad.
Abad.
This word appears frequently in the text, often in the context of the consequences of rejecting the truth. And it is most commonly translated into English as eternity or forever.
Which instantly triggers that binary, terrifying concept of infinite, endless time.
Right. But the commentators, specifically citing scholars like Art in the context of Chapter 11, point out that in classical Arabic literature, abad does not necessarily mean literal infinity. It can actually signify a long, continuous, but strictly finite period.
Like what?
They give the example of it representing a human lifespan, like 70 or 80 years.
Wait, that completely changes the psychological impact of the text. If the consequences of a bad action last and a bad means a lifetime rather than literal infinity, what does that do to our understanding of the universe?
It replaces a paralyzing terror with a profound, measured sense of responsibility. When we operate under the assumption of immediate, infinite doom, which is what the Qur'an were demanding, we become reactive. We panic.
Because it's all or nothing right now.
Exactly. But if we understand that the universe operates on a scale of deep, patient time, where actions have serious, long-lasting consequences, but not necessarily infinite destruction, it changes our perspective. It means we don't need to panic about the immediate supremacy of the foam. Yes, the person riding the foam might look successful today, but if the universe measures consequences in long, finite generational spans, the foam will inevitably dissipate.
It's the difference between day trading and compound interest. The person day trading meme stocks might have an incredible afternoon. They are riding the foam. And if you judge success by a 6-hour window, you feel like a failure for putting your money in a slow growth index fund. But over the 30 years, the day trader almost always burns out, and the compound interest builds a foundation.
That's a great analogy. And the text provides a historical example of the people who actually grasped this concept of time and changed their trajectory, the people of Jonah, which is why chapter 10 is named after him.
How does Jonah's story fit into this specific debate about time and doom?
Well, the commentary points out that Jonah's story is the great exception to the rule. In many of the historical narratives in the text, a prophet warns a nation. The nation demands immediate punishment, they refuse to change, and eventually the finite consequence, the destruction, arrives.
Right, the usual pattern.
But Jonah's people were different. They were warned of an impending consequence. But instead of mocking it or demanding it happen instantly, they actually utilized the time they were graciously given. They heeded the warning, they changed their collective behavior, and as a direct result, the impending punishment was completely removed.
They altered their own timeline.
Exactly. They recognized the delay in judgment not as a sign that the prophet was lying, but as a window of mercy. They used the time to pivot. It stands as a monumental testament within the text that trajectories are not locked in stone. Doom is not inevitable if you use the patient time of the universe to correct your course.
So, when you are anxious for results in your career or personal life, when you're frustrated that your business hasn't scaled, or you aren't seeing immediate changes in your physical health, or you feel like everyone else is passing you by on social media, stop and ask yourself this one grounding question. Am I building foam or am I building groundwater? Because the foam will get you noticed today, but it will vanish tomorrow.
It always vanishes.
The groundwater might be completely invisible right now. You might feel like you were digging in the dirt for years with nothing to show for it. But it is the only thing that will sustain you for a lifetime.
But we have to be honest with the listener here. Choosing to build groundwater is not a peaceful, undisturbed process. If you choose to pursue deep, sincere truth over a long period of time, you are going to encounter severe friction.
That's true.
Which brings us to the themes found in chapters 11 and 12, focusing on the story of Joseph and the concept of the meanest followers.
Because the moment you step off the path of performative virtue, the moment you stop chasing the foam and start doing deep work, people notice. And usually the people who notice first are the ones who feel the most threatened by your lack of participation in their superficial games.
They absolutely feel threatened. The commentary on chapter 12, the chapter of Joseph, is brilliant in how it frames this. The commentators explicitly note that the Qur'an isn't just recounting the history of Joseph for the sake of a campfire story. It is deploying the narrative of Joseph's brothers as a direct, highly targeted psychological lesson for the Quraysh, the prophet's opponents in Mecca.
We all know the broad strokes of the Joseph story, right? The favored son, the dreams, the jealousy. But the commentary hones in on the specific psychology of the brothers here, doesn't it?
It does. Joseph was highly favored, intellectually and spiritually gifted, and clearly destined for a trajectory of greatness. His brothers recognized this, and out of sheer blinding biological envy, they plotted against him.
They threw him in a pit.
Yeah, they didn't just dislike him, they literally devised a plan to throw him into a dark pit in the wilderness, hoping to erase his existence from their father's sight and permanently halt his rise. The commentary draws a bold, direct line between this ancient family betrayal and the plotting of the Quraysh against the prophet in Mecca.
It's pointing out that the most vicious opposition rarely comes from a distant, abstract enemy. The betrayal comes from inside the house.
Precisely. The Quraysh were from the same people as the prophet, the same family tree, the same social fabric, yet they were actively devising plans to confine him, exile him, or assassinate him.
Why?
Because his message of deep, sincere truth, his groundwater, was a direct threat to the economic and social foam they had built their entire society upon.
And that friction isn't just familial, it's deeply structural. It's about class and hierarchy. Let's look at chapter 11. The commentary highlights how the elites reacted not just to the prophet, but to the people who chose to follow him.
Yes, in chapter 11, we see the chiefs of the unbelievers, the wealthy, the powerful, the societal elite who controlled the narratives of the city. They look down on the early followers of the prophets. The text quotes these elites as dismissing the followers with a very specific phrase. They call them the meanest of us at first thought.
Let's unpack that phrase, the meanest. What exactly does that signify in this context? Are they calling them cruel?
No, in this translation, meanness refers to social standing in class. It means the lowest class, the poorest, the people without aristocratic lineage, without significant wealth, without formal societal credentials.
Oh, I see.
The elites looked at this burgeoning movement of spiritual truth And they couldn't intellectually defeat the logic of the message. So what do? They attack the social standing of the messengers. They essentially say, look at who is following you. It's the slaves, the poor, the nobodies. If this were a real, legitimate intellectual or spiritual movement, the people of substance, meaning us, the elites would have recognized it first and we would be leading it.
This is Elitism 101, and it maps flawlessly onto today's professional and intellectual worlds. Think about how often groundbreaking ideas, disruptive technologies, or vital social movements are initially championed by those the establishment considers the meanest.
All the time.
They lack the Ivy League degrees, they don't have the blue-chip venture capital backing, they aren't part of the legacy media institutions. And because they lack the proper credentials, the establishment sneers at them.
It's a defense mechanism by the establishment to protect their monopoly on authority.
Exactly. And just like Joseph's brothers, the fiercest opposition often comes from your own peers who feel threatened by your trajectory.
And what's fascinating is how the Quranic text handles this opposition. The commentary points out a crucial structural difference between the biblical account of the Joseph story and the Quranic account.
What's the difference?
The Quran deliberately omits many of the purely historical details found in the Bible. The specific names of the merchants, the exact geography, the granular logistics of the plot. It strips away the historical specificities to focus almost exclusively on the psychological and spiritual elements.
Why do that? I mean, from a narrative perspective, stripping the details seems kind of counterintuitive.
It does it to universalize the pattern.
Yeah.
By stripping away the historical specifics, the text elevates the story into an archetype. It emphasizes a universal truth. That all plots, whether they are born of the familial envy of Joseph's brothers, the societal elitism of the Quraysh, or the workplace politics you might face today, are ultimately governed by a higher order. The text continually reinforces a specific phrase, God is sufficient as a witness.
Meaning what?
Meaning that the plotting of the brothers, the scheming of the elites, the sneering of the credentialed class, it is all seen, it is all known, and it is all ultimately subservient to a larger narrative arc. The spiritual element is the absolute conviction that truth, rooted in the deep groundwater, cannot be permanently confined by the petty, envious traps of men.
I love that, because if we look at the physical trap, the pit Joseph was thrown into that was meant to be his end, his brothers looked down into that hole and thought, we won, it's over.
Right.
But structurally, logically, historically, the pit was actually the required first step on his journey to the palace. Think about the mechanics of the story. If he doesn't go into the pit, he doesn't get sold into Egypt. If he doesn't go to Egypt, he doesn't end up in prison where he interprets the dreams. If he doesn't interpret the dreams, he doesn't become the vizier who saves the entire region from starvation. The pit wasn't a coffin. It was an incubator.
That is a profound reframing, an incubator.
And in our modern lives, we all experience our own version of the pit. You get fired from a job you poured your soul into because of toxic office politics. You get exiles from a social group because you stopped participating in their gossip. You face a period of deep, terrifying isolation where everyone around you seems to be advancing, getting promoted, buying houses, and you are just stuck in the dark.
And the immediate biological reaction to that isolation is despair. You feel like the plot against you has succeeded. You feel like the elites were right to call you the meanest.
Of course you do. But the ancient text is insisting that these moments of career or social exile are rarely dead ends. If you are operating with sincerity, if you are diligently building groundwater, then the pit forces a necessary adaptation. The isolation biologically and psychologically forces introspection. It strips away your reliance on the superficial foam of the crowd. It forces you to develop the deep, unshakable internal resilience you will need for the next stage of your life.
This is a vital perspective shift for anyone experiencing professional or personal friction. When you face workplace politics, when your ideas are dismissed because you lack the right pedigree, or when you feel the cold, sharp sting of familial envy, you have to recognize it for what it is.
It's structural.
Yes, it is a structural human reaction. It is the predictable way the establishment always reacts to genuine disruption. It is not a final verdict on your worth, and it is certainly not the end of your story.
So the practical application for you listening is this. When facing workplace politics or familial envy, recognize it as a structural human reaction, not a final verdict on your worth. Keep your hands clean, stay relentlessly focused on the deep work, and trust that the pit is just an incubator on the journey.
But staying focused while you are in that pit or while you are doing the slow work of building groundwater is incredibly difficult because the human mind constantly searches for escape. Which leads us to our final major theme.
Session 4. Let's do it.
If you have audited your sincerity, if you are patiently enduring time, and if you are surviving the envy of your peers, there is one final, incredibly subtle internal track you must avoid. This is the culmination of the deep dive, focusing on chapters 14 and 15, and it deals with what we can only call the economics of human attention.
The economics of attention, it sounds like a concept coined in Silicon Valley 5 years ago, not in the Arabian desert centuries ago.
It truly does. But the commentary unpacks a striking, visually arresting verse from chapter 15, the chapter named The Rock. The prophet is given a direct, highly specific command regarding his mental and emotional state. The text says, "Do not strain your eyes after what of you then? We have given certain classes of them to enjoy, and do not grieve for them, and make yourself gentle to the believers."
They're not straining your eyes.
Yes. The commentary notes that this verse paints a beautiful picture of what a truly holy, focused mind looks like. The prophet, despite possessing immense spiritual wealth, profound intellectual clarity, and leading a world-changing movement, lived a life of unequaled material simplicity.
So he wasn't living in a palace.
No, he lived without the riches, the comforts, and the opulent embellishments enjoyed by his opponents and the elites of his day. And the Arabic phrase translated as straining the eyes is critical here. It signifies looking desirously, stretching your vision, exerting physical and mental effort to focus intensely on what others possess.
It's not just a passive glance. It's an active exertion of energy. You are straining to see over the fence at what they have.
Exactly. And this directive to stop straining the eyes is paired with another beautiful image in the same chapter. Chapter 15 mentions fertilizing winds.
What does that mean in this context?
In the natural world, these are the unseen atmospheric winds that drive the heavy clouds, bringing the rain that makes the herbage fruitful. The commentary explains that the text is using this to show that true nourishment, true sustainable growth, comes from an unseen natural order ordained by the divine.
Okay, I see.
It does not come from the superficial, man-made, highly visible wealth of the city elites. Your provision comes from the deep structure of reality, the fertilizing winds, not from the glittering prizes the elites are hoarding and displaying.
Wait, straining your eyes. That is an exact anatomical description of what we do on our phones every single night. We lie in bed, in the dark, and we literally physically strain our eyes, staring at a piece of glowing glass, obsessing over the curated successes, the impossible wealth, the perfect vacations, and the elevated status of different classes of people.
We really do.
We look at the 22-year-old founders raising millions, the influencers with flawless bodies, our high school classmates buying massive houses, and we strain our eyes desiring what they have been given to enjoy.
And what is the psychological and emotional result of that straining? What happens to the human mind when it spends hours a day doing this?
It results in total, hollow misery. We feel like we are failing, even if we are doing good, meaningful work in our own lives. We become bitter in the pit instead of using it as an incubator. But I want to push back on this ancient advice for a second.
Sure.
A lot of modern self-help, business culture, and even evolutionary psychology would argue that looking at others' success is vital for human progress. Doesn't looking at the competition drive ambition? Don't we need to see what's possible in order to aim higher? If we just put blinders on and stop looking at the elites, don't we risk becoming complacent and stagnant?
Well, that is the dominant cultural narrative, yes. The idea that comparison is the engine of ambition. But the text provides a profound counter-argument. If we look closely at the mechanics of the verse, the directive isn't just a negative command to look away and be blind to the world. It doesn't advocate for ignorance.
Okay, so what does it advocate?
The command to not strain the eyes is immediately paired with an alternative positive action. It says, "Do not strain your eyes and make yourself gentle to the believers." Other classical translations render that phrase as "lower your wing to them," which is a metaphor drawn from a bird lowering its wing to shelter and protect its young.
Oh, wow. Lower your wing.
The ancient antidote to the envy, the anxiety, and the hollow misery caused by straining your eyes at the elites isn't just putting on blinders. It is reallocating that exact same unit of mental and emotional energy into deep, gentle, protective investment in your immediate community.
So instead of looking out, you look in.
The text is telling us that true peace, and ironically true lasting influence, requires accepting your specific provision, trusting the fertilizing winds meant for your specific field, and stopping the grief over those who seem to be winning a superficial game. Because the energy you spend tracking the competition, the hours you spend doom-scrolling their curated lives, is energy actively stolen from sheltering and nurturing the actual human beings right in front of you.
This is a total paradigm shift.
Yeah.
We are programmed by LinkedIn and Instagram to believe that tracking the competition, constantly benchmarking ourselves against our peers, is the only way to survive in a hyper-competitive world. But the text is arguing that straining your eyes is a disease of the attention economy. It hollows you out.
It completely hollows you out.
It takes you away from your actual work. The cure for doom scrolling isn't just turning off your phone and staring at a wall. It's looking up, finding a colleague who is struggling, and lowering your wing. It's turning away from the curated, fictional lives of strangers and turning your full attention toward the messy, real, demanding lives of your family, your team, your actual friends.
Exactly. When you are deeply rooted in your actual physical community, when you are actively sheltering the people around you, the glittering wealth of the certain classes loses its hypnotic power over you. You stop grieving over what you don't have because you are so richly, exhaustingly occupied with serving what you do have.
This is the most practical, profound how-to for the modern listener. I want you to try this tomorrow. Notice the physical and emotional sensation when you open an app, or when you look at a colleague's promotion on LinkedIn and you feel that tightness in your chest. Notice when your eyes are literally straining at someone else's life.
Catch that moment.
Yes, catch that moment, and in that exact second, pivot. Take that exact unit of mental energy and text a friend to encourage them. Help a junior member of your team with a complex problem. Or just put the phone in a drawer and be fully gently present with your kids. Turn the strain of envy into an act of service.
That is the daily, hourly mechanism of how you stop building foam and start building groundwater.
Which brings us to the end of this incredibly dense, rich intellectual journey. We've talked about the necessity of dropping the performative masks and embracing sincerity, even when it requires setting hard boundaries.
Right.
We've explored the profound patience required to endure the slow wait for the groundwater while the world chases the foam. We've discussed how to survive the pit of envy without becoming bitter. And we've just uncovered how to guard our eyes from the shiny distractions of the attention economy by lowering our wings to those around us.
It's a comprehensive blueprint for a meaningful life. And as we close, I want to leave the listener with one final provocative synthesis drawn from the sources.
Lay it on us.
We talked earlier about how doing this deep work will inevitably cause friction. In Chapter 14, the chapter of Abraham, there is a vivid, almost shocking physiological description of how the opponents of truth react when they realize they cannot stop it. The text describes them in their sheer rage and frustration at the unstoppable nature of the truth, literally thrusting their hands into their mouths, biting their fingers in anger.
They are so infuriated that the truth won't bend to their will, they are practically consuming themselves. It's an image of a system short-circuiting.
Yes. The commentary notes this is an expression of absolute impotent rage. They realize that all their plotting, all their wealth, all their elite status, and all their loud, swelling foam cannot stop the deep, slow, inevitable growth of sincere truth.
And that is the final thought for you to mull over as you go about your week. When you choose to live sincerely, when you refuse to play the modern game of performative virtue, when you ignore the intoxicating but useless foam of immediate results, when you patiently endure the pit of social exile without becoming resentful, and when you refuse to strain your eyes at the superficial success of others, you might just enrage the superficial world.
You definitely will.
Your quiet, steady, groundwater existence will be a direct, existential challenge to their frantic noise. They might bite their fingers in frustration that you won't play their game. But while they are consuming themselves with impotent rage and endlessly chasing the passing foam, you will finally truly be rooted in the earth. That's the heart of this section. This is Wisdom for the Present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.